Hey, what is going on, YouTube? Hey, Aaron here. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. We've got a fun one and an informative one in today's video. As you guys can see here, we are in the USS Black, and there is a carrier on the enemy team. Well, there's a carrier on both teams, but you get the point. In this one, we're going to talk about playing defensive, knowing your role as a destroyer, and how to dodge carriers.
Brandon, just play it nice and slow. Let me figure things out.
Now, of course, these are all topics that I have covered in the past, but I feel like that they are just so important, and destroyer play really sets the tone for the match, right? If your destroyer is going out towards the spawn or towards the side he spawned on, trying to get the objective, spotting for his team, trying to take care of enemy destroyers, the match is much more enjoyable overall. And as you guys will see with my score throughout this match, if you do the things that are just in the realm of good destroyer play that a majority of the player base agrees on. Now, again, you don't have to play it the exact way every time. Some people want to go out and have fun, but if you just try to fulfill some of those principles, your score, your result, your damage, your credit earnings, everything, your team satisfaction rating, that little smiley face, it's like, how was your service, will all be better at the end of the game. So right off the bat here, we have already gotten 2 spotting ribbons, and we have sent a set of zoning torpedoes up the center of the map. Now, of course, this is, destroyer dependent. If you're not in a destroyer with long-range torps, it's something you can't do. And a few of you may be asking, Aaron, why are you leaving the center spawn? Well, this is a carrier game, and on this particular map, there's obviously no domination point in that center location. And for some reason, the way the spawns were set up, there was 4 ships on the right and only 2 on the left here. So in order to help kind of fill that gap or that void, we went to the left here. On top of that, there was already a destroyer on the right. It is very frustrating when you see destroyer players group up. The same as battleship players or cruiser players in any regard. In 95% of scenarios, it is always better as a whatever player you are, just to get away from your teammates. You remove crossfires, you remove firing angles, you remove pretty much most of your advantages when you group up. Now, of course, there are certain situations, a good push with another secondary cruiser or battleship, whatever the situation may be. But here is a situation where the enemy kind of utilizes a few principles that my team particularly does not. As you guys just saw there, we were only briefly spotted by that Sumner, and this was honestly a fault of my own. I didn't smoke up within the time. I should have seen that Kutuzov out there. On top of that, I believe it got shot by 3 or 4 other ships. And that is a perfect example from the enemy team of focus fire on a spotted destroyer. I was maybe spotted for 5 seconds and have already lost over 50% of my health. So a poor use of health on my part, but an excellent example of enemy focus fire or focus fire on a destroyer from the enemy team. As a result of our positioning, though, our friendly radar from that Congress and our radar with a little bit of focus fire from the other few ships there, that enemy Sumner is now dead, and we are able to freely roam this flank without much resistance. Which is just another great point to talk about. If the enemy is heavily contesting the cap you are trying to get, don't sacrifice yourself trying to do so in the first 4 minutes of the game. It is much better to drop your torpedoes or get a little bit of damage in a safe manner, reposition, and live to fight another day. As you can see there, our Atlantico, with an aggressive push early on, has managed to get a secondary kill on the enemy Oysterjotland, and now the enemy is 2 destroyers down. Now, of course, they still have a carrier, but with the way spotting mechanics work now, which I think is terrible, they aren't really able to do much besides isolate us, and later in this game, we're going to talk about how to avoid that. And just a little side note on that spotting mechanic, the reason I don't like it is because they are only spotted really for the carrier now if you aren't firing your main guns. So most players are not going to see that on the mini-map because honestly, number 1, they don't care, and number 2, they are just unaware and in their own world focusing on the biggest target in front of them. Which brings me to another point, and probably the most important point for all classes, not only destroyers. Looking at the mini-map right now, what does our team need? Well, they basically just need us to sit here, spam torpedoes, and spot those battleships for our friendly cruisers and other battleship there on this flank. And it's at this point where advice and tactics can really only take you so far. If we had lost our destroyer on the opposite flank, for example, and we did not get the eliminations that we did over there on that sea side, you could definitely make the argument that I need to transverse back over there and get that sea cap. However, in this given situation, with the mass of the enemy fleet on this flank and us, having sea cap under relative control, we haven't got it yet, but we have a destroyer which should be getting it. He's not exactly in it, but it doesn't matter. We have the advantages here, so I'm going to stay on this side, like I mentioned, spot, and just drop and create a little bit of a crossfire. Now, this is definitely not the best diagram, but I wanted to put it in here just to give you guys a good example of what a crossfire is. Essentially, over there on diagram A, you can see we are kind of out here on the left, and these battleships now have a decision to make. Either they can stay broadside to our torpedoes, which a few of them do, or they can turn in and expose their broadside to the remainder of our team, which is why creating a crossfire is so important and why, once again, it is never a good idea to group up. And these Reds are learning that example firsthand right now. They have nothing else left to do except to turn out and give broadside to all of our team or sit there and enjoy the onslaught of torpedoes. And now we are essentially reaping the rewards of playing the correct way. We got that early destroyer elimination, we got the cap, and now we are free to get all of the torpedo damage that we want. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see destroyer players avoid their responsibilities in order to attempt to get torpedoes on target, all to look up in 5 minutes and see that half of their team is gone, they're down 2 caps, and then go to the forums and blame their teammates. But anyway, moving on to more pressing matters, as you can see, we just narrowly avoided that carrier torpedo. And here comes the carrier dodge portion of this video. For torpedo planes, you want to go head on, as we are doing in this situation, either bow or stern on, and kind of just go with the flow. As you can see here, the spread of these torpedoes allows us to go safely in between because we are head on. When you get caught broadside, and I will put up an example of what the torpedo spread from the aircraft carrier view looks like, and if you do not turn head on, you are making it far more difficult to avoid getting hit by those. And right on cue, here come the dive bombers, and with the exception of the Russians and potentially the Kaga, you essentially want to be broadside or slightly angled to the dive bombers, as that will throw off their spread. You do not want to go head on into dive bombers, like I said, with the exception of the Russians. But there, with a slight adjustment of the throttle and a little bit of RNG as well, we are able to easily avoid a good majority of those bombs. Something else you don't want to do, as you can see now, we are spotted by the carrier icon. The little eyeball indicates you are spotted by another ship. The carrier icon indicates you are spotted by the carrier only. If I were to open up my guns in that particular situation, we would be permanent spotted by that Massachusetts and spotted to the remainder of the enemy team. When you are spotted by the carrier, you are only visible to him and on the minimap. You are not visible to the enemy, which is, again, one of those changes I didn't necessarily like. Here, however, is a situation where we had to pay attention to our twist and track and pay attention to this carrier. As you saw, the Kutuzov came from behind that island. Honestly, a good play from him in order to try and trap us, essentially. And here's just another good dodge, another reason you want to stay either bow or stern on to those torpedo planes. Paying attention to multiple different targets in a destroyer is a must. As you can see, we are dodging these torpedo planes while simultaneously avoiding detection from that Kutuzov. Playing destroyers is a fine art of knowing where to put your ship with its concealment and knowing how to survive. It is certainly not difficult to go out and have a rather mediocre game getting a few torpedoes on target in a destroyer, but it is certainly not as easy as a majority of the battleship mains would like to claim that it is. Having to avoid carriers, having to avoid high DPM cruisers, having to avoid battleships spec'd with HE, radar, and other destroyers, it is one of the most difficult classes to play well. That being said, when you get a game without a carrier and without radar cruisers, it is insanely simple to go out, avoid all responsibilities, get a few torpedoes on target, and assume that you had a good game. Now, that's not to say it can't be done, because in certain situations, that's all you need in order to have a good game. I have seen far too many Shima Kaze players with the steel kill counter camo with over 1,000 kills, and I just watch their moves in battle, but alas. Anyway, back to our game though, and kind of the finishing touches on this one. There, we launched a set of torpedoes at the last moment we could, and that Kudasov coincidentally backed up, so that is another few torpedoes on target and elimination on him. Once again, speaking on paying attention to multiple different situations, we smoked up in this gap, which kind of avoided detection from that carrier, while also firing on that carrier when our torpedoes were on the way to that Kudasov. Again, you will have to utilize situational awareness and see what the biggest threat is. But speaking of situational awareness, and this is the difference truly between 55% win rate and 60%, 65% plus win rate players right here. What do we need in this situation in order to win? Absolutely nothing. We are up almost over 400 points at this point, and unless the enemy gets all caps, which they have no position to do so, unless we all die, we win this game. Far too often you will see players going out of their way to get 4,000 and 5,000 extra damage while putting their ship in a detrimental position, and the enemy ends up getting the win. Here coming up in just a moment is actually a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Our Z-46 has pushed well into the Bravo cap, and I applaud him for trying to do so. However, he doesn't put his ship in an ideal position. He probably kind of got caught in a little bit of a crossfire there and actually gets dev struck by that carrier, by the Saipan there. And right here, actually, I would like to point out the difference between, blindly chasing damage and smartly utilizing all of the tools available to you. For instance, the radar we have left in this game, while kind of sitting on the edge of this island cover with a good remainder of our smoke screen there. Briefly detect it, but we always have an escape route, which is kind of the final point of this video. Always have an escape route, right? Are you going around a blind corner? Do you know where the radar ships are? Do you know where the other destroyers are? Have you lost track of a battleship? Do you know where the carrier is? All of these things should be going through your head at some point during the match if you are trying to be a good destroyer player. And once again, speaking on kind of throwing matches here, we have a battleship well within the Bravo cap, and I understand it. He wants to get a little bit of damage as we kind of employ a little bit of an advanced tactic here. We are shooting behind this island and actually not becoming detected. We, of course, have the AP loaded, as AP on broadside light cruisers is going to absolutely chunk. We got a little bit trolled there, but with the help of the Pobeda and our Charles Martel, we got the elimination of that Provincian. We are now essentially able to freely roam the rest of this match without much threat, unless, of course, we take a torpedo or a pretty gnarly salvo from that battleship.
World of Warships, really?
This one is coming to a close, though, so I hope all of those different topics and points can help you become a better destroyer player in World of Warships Legends. And conversely, if you're not a destroyer player, it can help you better support them as a cruiser and or battleship. Now, of course, getting blue team support in a standard match is like, I don't know, trying to win the Powerball, but sometimes it does happen, and when it does, it is glorious. So that's going to do it for this one. Actually, one final thing I'm just now thinking of, and I probably should have said it a lot sooner, because we talked about trying to avoid carriers a little bit in this one. When you are initially going into that engagement with a carrier, turn off your AA until you are carrier detected, as a good number of carrier players will look for that flak cloud, which is dispensed by your destroyer. For them, most destroyers have an AA range which is longer than their air detection range. But there's the final scoreboard, about 120,000 damage, and damage is really not important. The XP number, that number on the final screen, is a 3194 score there with 2 eliminations. And again, you're just going to have better overall gameplay and experiences if you kind of follow the principles that I laid out here for you. So that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. There's a little bit of my build. I believe I have Eric Bay and Sims maybe for health, or I don't think this one was double detection, but I will go over my specific build in a different video. But that's a little tip and trick video on how to become a better destroyer player in World of Warships Legends. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great day. I'm out. Peace.